Ashley, Bob Woodward, your colleague, said when his last book, Fear, came out that the truth emerges. I think that was a safe bet with Trump and COVID, but it is jarring to hear Trump admit in calls in February and March that he knew COVID would be deadly here in this country. It suggests that maybe he did see the PDB prepared by his intelligence community around the same date that that first tape with Woodward was recorded, and then acknowledging to Bob Woodward, who he must know wasn't talking to him for kicks, that it was going to be part of the public record, admitting that he intentionally lied about the dangers, intentionally likes to downplay it.
That's right. There was already a damning narrative about the president's handling of this pandemic, which went something like, this is a president who doesn't trust science, who doesn't trust expertise, who, if you're being charitable, maybe doesn't understand the science or the full scope or magnitude of the pandemic. And that's why he has bungled this so badly. What Bob Woodward's book does is it blows up that damning narrative for something even more devastating for the president, which is that this is a president who privately did understand the magnitude of the violence and the potential destruction it had, of the virus, rather, did understand how deadly and how damaging it could be, that it was airborne, that it was worse than the common flu, that, as we heard him say, it wasn't just older people, but younger people. And despite knowing all this in private, he went forth to the public and he misled the public. He told them it would disappear. He told them it would go away. He told them it wasn't worse than the common flu. And so now you have someone who is knowingly ignoring science and evidence. In fact, when he knows better, when he's demonstrated in those conversations with Bob Woodward that he knows better, when we know now his national security team has told him better, and he is still giving information to the public that very well led to the now colossal death toll we're facing that's still growing.
You know, Ashley Parker, something that struck me in listening to the tapes of Trump talking to Woodward that are embedded in the Post story about the Woodward book is that Donald Trump tries to act smarter when he's on the phone with reporters. And so he didn't deny knowing the intel, which told him in his PDB that COVID was coming. It blows up the cover story. You know, the cover story goes like this. I was never briefed by the intelligence community. My briefer didn't mention it, which was never really plausible. But when you hear the private conversation with Bob Woodward, and we know he tries to curry the favor and approval of reporters when he's in private with them. It's why he later showed him the love letters between Kim Jong-un and himself. And he tries to act smarter than he does when he sort of plays, you know, a character in a mob movie at the press briefings. But you see that some of the other lies that have been told start to crack open when you listen to these conversations with Woodward.
That's exactly right. And it's sort of right now, the White House is engaged, of course, in a ton of frantic finger pointing as to whose fault this Woodward interview was. By interview, it's frankly interviews. The president, I believe, sat down with or spoke on the phone with Bob Woodward 18 times. And so this is a president, again, who, if you had done any basic research, you understand who Bob Woodward is. You understand the sort of rigorous reporter he is. You understand the books he's written, not just about previous presidents, but about your own presidency. And Trump still believed that he could win over Bob Woodward, get him to write a positive book, as you said, curry favor with him, and sort of was overly confident that in these 18 sessions, he could bring Bob Woodward over to his MAGA team. And of course, that's not what happened. But what we do see are the behind the scenes and the cracks between the public and private Trump persona, especially with his handling of the coronavirus.
Robert Gibbs, Bob Woodward, I believe, wrote 4 books about the Bush White House in the years after 9/11. They were all pretty unsparing, at least 3 3/4 of them were. But one thing that I know from my experience is that people talk to him. And one thing that comes through loud and clear is that nobody around Trump likes him, respects him, or think he's fit for the office he holds. My question for you isn't, does this break through? Because I think the Trump voter story is known now. It's out of the closet. They won't leave him if and when he shoots someone on Fifth Avenue, should that come to pass. My question for you is the impact of Trump and his own voice sounding so callous. We know the Trump campaign is obsessed with the suburbs. Trump tweets about it every single day.
Right.
What do you think the impact is of hearing Trump's voice on a tape saying, yeah, I knew, I downplayed it, but I knew the intel.
Yeah, I'm struck because this is a time, in just in that quick back and forth with the press, this isn't Trump battling against some anonymous source. This isn't Trump battling against something somebody said a long time ago. This is Trump now battling his own voice just a few months ago. It is a story that has been with our lives fully 100% for the last 7 months. And to listen to him say at a very early stage that this was 5 times or more than 5 times deadly than the normal flu, and that he always and still does want to downplay it. These are voters in the suburbs who know friends that have died from this, who have family that have died from this. And they don't blame Trump for having brought the virus to America, but they blame Trump, and now they can, in his own words, for not acting strongly enough to do something about it, for downplaying it, for all of those people that walked around and said, you can't get this, it's just a head cold, it's nothing to worry about. All those stories of those people that have died are because for months and months, nothing was done in a way that should have been to take care of the most deadly thing we faced in 100 years.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.